we may feel we're in mental or emotional chaos or in physical disrepair or physical disharmony, we are always standing on the summit. Why? Because we're free thinkers. Why? Because we have an infinite mind that works through us, that if we open our mind to allow ourselves to listen to, it doesn't look like so sharp a drop. As a matter of fact, sometimes it doesn't even look like a drop. I think that because there's a universal order, there's a law that we have always thought into that hasn't always brought us what we would like to see, but have you noticed every time you think you're coming up against having to jump off into peril in your life, somehow you made it through? What is that? What is that? It's interesting that standing on the precipice and the jump isn't the hard part. The jump is a natural order of unfoldment of how you have prepared your mental consciousness to the point of taking the step where the next one is jumping. This part is where the fears come up. This part is where the doubts come up. This part is where the need to keep running back or circling back or going back to comfort or doubting yourself or second guessing yourself or taking a left turn and sabotaging yourself. That's the hard part. Once you get on the precipice, it's already done. All you have left to do is fly. The law will hold you because you have been feeding what you need to feed in, consciously or subconsciously, into that law, into a law whose nature it is only to create what you give it. So of course when you jump, you will be held because it goes before you and makes the way. I really think that's kind of exciting. I didn't like the idea of peril, like perish. Peril. So I've got a lot of books here today. I want to share some wonderfulness from people who I think understand this idea. I read from this a couple of weeks ago. It's called Sacred Selfishness. The topic then was Sacred Selfishness, the Law of Sacrifice. On the right page. I'm going to start, you don't need to know what preceded it. When we determine to treat ourselves instead of our symptoms. When we determine to treat ourselves. Now, ourselves does not include the limited ideas based on what we've experienced in our life. Ourselves means the full wholeness of our potential. And it can be found through intuition, through listening. It is that soul's call, that urge that we often want to say, get thee behind me, get thee behind me. Until finally, there is some disorder or misalignment or disharmony or chaos that is created, seemingly, we don't know how this happens, outside of us in our lives because we're not listening. Because we're not listening. So then what we do is we start paying attention. Oh, well, I'm not sure where I am in this. Maybe I'd better take a look. Maybe I'd better take a look. And that's when you start to bring yourself back into alignment. That's when you go deeper. That's when you look at things that you hadn't planned on looking at, but all of a sudden are just sitting there right on the surface to be seen and heard. They are needs. They are our needs. They are our soul's needs. They are our spirit's call for our own true nature to wake up and not be false against ourselves. It says, when we would determine to treat ourselves instead of our symptoms, it means we have to take a look into our unconscious if we really want our treatments to bring healing and new life. Crisis and illness threaten the sense of order and the assumptions we've built up on our little islands. It makes us move. It makes us take another step toward the precipice. Now, the author says, sometimes my process was difficult and unsettled. At other times, it was exhilarating. So once you start working toward what you are starting to listen to, so that it can be revealed to lead you into your highest and best life and greatest good in all ways, there is a tendency to draw back. Because you've never been there in that way, you do not know it, and we do have a desire to try to understand things. When we move to our soul's call and we start to live more into alignment with our spiritual nature and the nature of all life, this universal nature in a spiritual universe, it is very uncomfortable because we've stayed not only living inside our box, but thinking that this, what we created, is what is reality. When in reality, it is only a reflection of wherever you were in your consciousness at the time you created it. That's all it is. And it can be shifted at any time. So he says, sometimes my process was difficult and unsettled. At other times it was exhilarating. And like any journey undertaken in rough weather, I often felt an impulse to turn back. A desire to seek comfort in the old home of my dreams or in a warm bed of certainty. It would have been easy to return to my old ways and to the symbols of success that I knew would be supported by the people close to me. But somewhere inside of me a voice was saying, yes, go back and you'll suffer a heart attack within a decade. Deep inside I knew that going back would not satisfy me. I later discovered that the mythic patterns supporting my feeling, or I later discovered that, okay, if the mythic searcher refuses to call to adventure, he or she invites darkness upon himself. If the mythic call to adventure, so if we don't listen to the soul's call and we decide to disregard it, we invite darkness upon ourselves. That's when the chaos starts to appear in the physical realm. In modern life, Jung refers to this act as a regressive restoration of the old way of life and appearances in the face of fear, an act that will result in living a hollow life. So we want to be alive, because we are. Because everything within us is alive. Everything within us has a perfect way of operating and creating and replenishing itself in its perfect nature. That is who we are. So the spiritual path is a way of recognizing that, coming to understand it in our own terms. That's tantamount to saying, the God of your own understanding. That place within you that is of infinite intelligence and wisdom, that's always creating a way and a means in your outer world, whether you identify it as such or not, that is giving you the path to walk on. I'm looking at Jenna because Jenna's just recently implanted herself here from Midland, Texas, and she's coming back into the ministry, reaffiliating after many years. And she was telling us her story at class on Thursday night, and she said, I just love when you can see how things perfectly come together, when there's no struggle, when it's so evident. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Well, here's the thing. It's always perfectly coming together. It just doesn't always feel that way, because sometimes when it's easier because you can see it and it looks like it's smooth, the way is moved smooth before us, we assume that that's God at work, or our own consciousness, you know, working with God, and together we're working on. But when it's not smooth, somehow we feel that we are not privy to or connected with this all-empowering intelligence. What we must remember is this infinite mind does know more than us, because it's infinite. And as we open our consciousness to sometimes take the step, even when it's hard, but it's a soul's calling, not our fear calling us, not our fear saying, gotta get out of here, Or not our fears saying, ooh, there's greener grass over there. I'm attracted. There must be something. It's a symbol. I'm going to run to that. When we haven't centered ourselves, when we haven't been aware of this central point of consciousness and that connection, then we are going to fall over the precipice. So how do we get to that center point? How do we get to that place of being centered? Well, for me, you could have your own words, of course, to it, but for me, there are three things. One is, I forgot the first one I was going to say to you. Isn't that interesting? Excuse me. I wanted to go to the last one. I don't know why that was. Now, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm just going to go to my notes and give you the one I wrote. For some reason, I will find out later. Listening. That's why. I've already talked about it. Isn't that funny? Okay, we've already been there. Oh, that's... I've already said it. Okay. Second one is patience. Oh, patience. Patience. Patience allows us to kind of look at things in a different light than what we immediately see them as. Because we immediately see things usually as not the beauty and the awe-inspiring and the possibility and potential of this infinite mind going before us that knows exactly the right and perfect way to lead us to nirvana, to heaven on earth, to heaven within. So sometimes we need the patience to step back and be still and contemplate that that hard thing in front of us is absolutely the most beautiful offering and gift. Specifically for us. Because why? It comes through us. Why? Because we've already started to make the way. Even when our mind fights it, there is that something within us that's greater that knows, that keeps moving itself forward and evolving. You evolve forward. You can't evolve backwards. You evolve and expand. You expand the expression, expand the experience into the freedom. Into the freedom meaning more, living more into the truth and the authenticity of your own being, which is one in the connection of all life. So sometimes patience, as hard as it is, makes us see the good in the ugly, the good in the ugly. It transforms the hardship. Then you're centered in truth. Then you can take the step. But if you take the step in the hardship, it just seems to get harder. Now it may get harder, but you don't feel. It may not look like what you want, but you're carrying something of greatness within you that knows. And you know you know. You are conscious of the possibility as you take that next step. So listening to hear something new rather than taking your old story in and running away from something or running to something, the patience to start to assess the whole perfection of this moment, and actually, as Byron Katie does in her work, the turnaround, right? To flip it completely to the opposite side, which, by the way, we do in our teaching in spiritual mind treatment in the third step. We take something that is not working, that does not feel good, that we wish to change in our own experience, and we restate it in the affirmative, in first person, without time or space, in the present moment. This is the work that we do as we walk to this precipice. We don't think we're walking to a precipice. We just do the work. And all of a sudden one day we find ourselves there. I love you. Thank you. Thank you for bringing the joy and the play to this day. So sometimes we don't intend it, but we find ourselves there. And that's why I don't think it's full of peril, impending peril or doom. I think that the precipice, which, through Google, in terms of chemistry, Helen, I had to get this in, precipitate, precipice, precipitate, to cause a solid substance to be separated from a solution. To me, I immediately read that and I went, okay, the solid substance is not the essence or the ether or that which is not seen or not heard or not known, that is all that intelligence that's always moving to create, that we can't see. It's not the process that we can't see. That solid substance is who we think we are in this body form, who we think we are based on our stories, the stories that we have created within our own mind to identify ourselves. So precipitate to cause this to fall away and be separated, to be left behind, in a manner of speaking, from the solution, from the evolution. Evolution is light. It's often unseen. You know how sometimes you end up someplace and you go, I don't even know how I got here. Because you've left your mind behind. The mind, the part of mind that's being dysfunctional, the part of mind that is being so attached to control what it needs to look like, or who you think you are, or most often who you think you are not, or what you cannot. You leave a part behind the mind that is attached to all the things you don't want. And you are freed, and in that freedom you feel lighter to the potentiality of all the things that are now possible. I would say that's standing on the precipice. Rumi says, I begged, is there a way into you? A ladder? Your head is the ladder. Bring it down under your feet. The mind, the globe of awareness, is a starry universe that when you push off with your foot, 1,000 new roads become clear. So basically, get out of your own way, trust that you know, or that something within you does, and take the step. I used to think I was a thought away from something. I've come to know, and it was not easy, this coming to know. And it was certainly not easy taking this step, but that I was a step away from something, which means I needed to take the soul's calling and I needed to form it into, on this physical world, into an action step. And when I did that, 1,000 roads became clear. And may I say that not all of those roads looked like smooth paths. Rumi also says, come to the orchard in the spring. This one's for you, Maynard. Come to the orchard in the spring. There is light and wine and sweethearts in the pomegranate flowers. If you do not come, these do not matter. If you do come, these do not matter. When you come, the fact that you are on the precipice doesn't matter because your heart knows you are ready to take the next step. So like in the orchard, if you've made the step, it's because it has sought you, it has called you, it is already in you. You have already made this energetic connection with this as your truth. All you're doing in the physical world is just taking a step into it. It's already been done. You have prepared the way. You have prepared the table, just like this infinite God or intelligence has laid everything before you, meaning everything within you you need to have the capacity, the strength, the vision to take the next step. And I'm going to conclude with Angels Sing in Me. It's a book I got from Reverend Karen Chase quite a long time ago. And every once in a while I turn to it. James Dillett Freeman, it's his memorial book. And you know how we like to do this? Oh, what a coincidence. So the one I turned to this morning was, To Thine Own Self. The lake looked at the mountain and thought, Oh, fortunate mountain, rise so high, while I must lie so low. You look far out across the world and take part in many interesting happenings, while I can only lie still. How I wish I were a mountain. The mountain looked at the lake and thought, oh, fortunate lake, lying so close to the warm-breasted earth, while I loom here, craggy, cold, and uncomfortable. You are so peaceful, while I am constantly having to battle howling storm and blazing sun. How I wish I were the lake. All the time, quietly, the mountain was coming down in silver streams to run into the lake. And the lake was rising as silver mists to fall as snow upon the mountain. So that within you that knows is making the way in your life right now. For you to have a different way of seeing who you are and what life is. Because it is already doing its work. Your soul has had a conversation and a contract. Your personality, sometimes, and this feeling that we need something we need to get, gets in the way of us just opening to give. We tend to want to receive from the outer and claim our strength and our happiness and our joy and our sustenance from that which is limited within itself in this physical realm. Until one day we listen and we have the patience to sit with and see differently. And then all of a sudden we have this experience of a newfound freedom to be. We are not the lake, nor are we the mountain, because one cannot exist without the other. So what I know for me is what I know for you, is that this harmony of this beautiful orchestra, playing music we have never heard before, in this realm, in this world, as this incarnation, is very familiar to our soul. So we listen, we have the patience to see differently and embrace all of who we are and the gifts that have been given. And if we do that, we relinquish and release our attachment to what is possible. And we come to the precipice, sometimes absolutely clear why we're here and recognizing it, and sometimes it's a surprise, but we recognize it when we're there. Knowing that there is a universe and a way of life that will always support us if we take that next step. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you.